Jack shook his head. Not a train, wrong direction and wrong sound. I think it's a car. Or a jeep. Jack didn't say a word, but his face gave away the answer to my question. He slithered off the rock we were sitting on, and I did the same, using it for cover. Can you see anything? I whispered, peering around the rock and through the bushes and trees that stood between the field and us. Nothing, but it's coming closer. There was no mistaking that. The rumbling sound was getting louder and louder. Even without seeing it, I could picture it in my mind. A jeep carrying two soldiers, one carrying a rifle, the second with his weapon at his side. What would they say to us if they caught us again? More important, what would they do to us? I looked around the rock and caught a glimpse of the vehicle. It was a jeep. As it flashed by, the sound started to fade, and there was a squealing noise. Brakes. It was stopping. The pitch of the engine changed, then it started to get louder once more, and then it stopped completely. They'd stopped. I looked over at Jack. He was pressed down tightly to the ground, and his head was turned away from me. I reached out and tapped him on the shoulder. He turned and mouthed the words, "Don't move." He was right. We had to stay still. There was no way they could have seen us yet. Was there? "Identify yourself," yelled a man, and I almost jumped into the air in response. "Come out with your hands up," called a second male voice. I looked over at Jack. His eyes were pressed tightly closed. "If you don't come out now, we're going to shoot." "Jack, we have to," I hissed at him. He opened his eyes and nodded. There was no choice. I was just going to stand up when off to the side, 4 men dressed in black stood up first, their hands in the air. I looked at Jack and he looked at me, and we dropped back down to the ground. "Come out slowly with your hands in plain view," one of the men shouted. Jack had wriggled around and was sitting up behind a bush. Quickly I crawled over and joined him. Through the bush and the scrub up ahead, we could see the scene being played out. The 4 men, obviously the men from the bridge, were slowly coming forward toward 2 soldiers standing at the edge of the field in front of a jeep, with their rifles leveled right at them. I recognized one of the soldiers from the night before. "They caught them," I whispered. "They caught them." "They're not carrying anything," Jack hissed. "What do you mean?" "The spool of wire. They've ditched it somewhere." And "Speicherdeutsch," called out one of the soldiers loudly. "What does that mean?" I whispered to Jack. "I don't know. Deutsch. Isn't that German?" I strained my mind, trying to think of the few words in German that our Opa, our father's father, had taught us. "Ja, wir sprechen Deutsch," called back one of the 4 men in black. There was that word again. "They're Germans," I hissed at Jack. "They really are German agents." One of the soldiers barked out a command. I didn't understand what he was saying, so it must have been in German. But the 4 men all responded, lowering their hands and placing them on the tops of their heads instead. There was another order given, and the 4 men dropped to their knees, their hands still locked together. One of the soldiers lowered his rifle while the second man stepped back, his weapon still aimed at the men. The first soldier launched into a series of rapid questions. "He's interrogating them," Jack said. "What's to know?" I asked. "They're German secret agents who just tried to destroy a railroad bridge." "With mud for bombs?" Jack said. "Oh yeah, that's right. Besides, they probably don't know anything about what happened on the bridge, or they would have stopped them there." Of course he was right about that too. "Maybe we should tell them." "Don't be stupid," Jack hissed. "We're not supposed to be here either. Just watch and stop talking." The soldier walked back and forth in front of the 4 men. He barked out questions I couldn't understand, and they answered back. He stopped in front of one of the men and bent over and started yelling at him. The man shook his head repeatedly but wasn't answering. The soldier drew back his hand and slapped him, sending him reeling backwards. I gasped in shock. Jack looked over at me. "Serves him right," he whispered. "That's the way you have to treat Nazis and enemy agents." The man picked himself up and returned to the same position as the others, on his knees. The soldier barked out another order, and slowly the 4 men, hands still on top of their heads, rose to their feet. Another order was given, and the 4 men turned around, facing away from the soldiers. The soldier who had been doing all the speaking retrieved his rifle, and now both soldiers trained their weapons on the men. I couldn't understand what they were saying. It must have been German again. But the 4 men in black started walking silently away. I could see the 2 men with their rifles aiming right at them, and that's when the noise exploded. Bang, 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 bang. As the 4 lifeless bodies dropped to the ground, I couldn't believe what I had seen. Oh, wait. I made that part up. Sorry, Jess. That last part was sort of made up. Let me go back to where I said. The soldier who had been doing all the speaking retrieved his rifle, and now both soldiers trained their weapons on the men. "What are they doing?" I asked. "I think they're going to shoot them," Jack stammered. "They can't do that. They can't. Can they?" One of the soldiers lowered his rifle, and then the second did the same. They started to laugh, and then the 4 men lowered their hands and turned around. They started to laugh as well. They walked toward the soldiers. One of them reached out and hugged one of them. It was the man who'd been slapped. They laughed and talked and smiled and slapped each other on the back end. This was unbelievable. What was happening? I turned to Jack. He looked totally stunned. One of the soldiers handed his rifle to one of the men dressed in black. He walked over and climbed behind the wheel of the Jeep. The second soldier climbed into the seat beside him. The 4 men, one still holding on to the rifle, piled into the back, 2 filling the seats, the other 2 standing, holding on to the big roll bar. The engine roared to life, and the gears ground together as the Jeep started off. We stayed hidden behind the bush, not moving as the Jeep bumped across the field, getting smaller and smaller, until it disappeared behind a stand of trees and was gone. Jack, I don't understand, I stammered. My mind was filled with raw emotions and thoughts, none of which made any sense. What just happened? Jack just shrugged and shook his head. I don't know, but I know we have to get out of here.